Hey guys, welcome to another weekly focus. So we're just going to pick up from where we left off last week. And before that, I'll just show you guys the trade recap I had from last week. So let's look at this. So the only position I had from last week was a gold position. So we had this buy attempt right here. So if you remember, we had this impulsive move to the downside. There was a rejection from here from the sellers. We had another rejection from here. So my expectation at this point was to see prices moving to the upside and taking out this highest, but unfortunately it didn't play out as expected. So this was a -1 for me. So price just came back and it took me out. So we had an initial push to the upside. Right here, but eventually price just crumbled to the downside, and I'll show you guys when we look at gold in a minute. I'll show you guys what I'm looking at. So that's a -1 for me on this position on gold. And let's look at the DXY. Well, let's look at these other pairs and see what we have for this coming week. So we're just picking up from where we left off, let's say last week. So looking at this market structure on the flow, so this on the daily time frame, and I explained this already like the other time frames during last week's focus. If you look at this flow is to the downside, so you have price moving to the downside. You have an impulsive move, you have a pullback. There's an impulse, there's a pullback, there's an impulse. So at this point, and last week again, we was expecting prices to move all the way to the upside. So you can see this delivery to this trend line thing on the daily time frame. So the bias on the DXY again still remains the same. So we're still in this pullback phase for me. So price is still pulling back. So on lower time frames, let's say on the hourly time frame, you should see a minor uptrend that's playing out currently. So this minor uptrend is simply a pullback on this daily time frame for us to see prices coming back to this area, to this trend line on the daily time frame. So if price pulls back to this area, you're looking at these points as pivot points. So if price comes back to an area like this, you expect the sellers again on the daily time frame to attempt to take prices again to the downside. And if they fail to take prices to the downside, you could see a breakout of this area. You see a retest maybe to this psychological level, or price coming in lower and you see prices moving again to the upside. So those are all possibilities, but the first thing is for us to look at the minor structure that's playing currently, and we'll play with this minor structure. So what price is going to do once it gets to an area like this, so you can see this already from previous price action. Once price gets to an area like this, it's going to do what it has to do. But currently, we can go on lower time frames and try to anticipate what price is most likely going to do on these lower time frames, just so you can get the delivery or the pullback to the daily time frame. So this on the daily time frame, so you have this flows to the downside, and you can look at this, let's say the 8-hour time frame. So on the 8-hour time frame, price is currently sat at this psychological level right here. So you have a psychological level here of 100,000 flat, and there's a current flow you see on the 8-hour time frame. You have this movement right here. So you had this impulsive move to the downside, which is not different from what we had right here. We had an impulsive move to the downside. We had a flat out at this area right here, inability for prices to move to the downside. Then you had a pullback thing. Same thing, we've had another impulsive move. There's this inability for price to move to the downside, and so we're still expecting a pullback and a delivery to this trend line on the daily time frame. So on lower time frames, we should normally see price moving to the upside, giving you another structure flow, or a delivery to the daily time frame. So if you look at this on the hourly time frame, I'm just going to step down to the hourly time frame real quick. So let's bring this right here, and I'll make this really bigger. So here's a flow I'm looking at on the hourly time frame. Now, I said this already, I said this last week. When you look at this structure move on the hourly time frame, you can look at it as a channel, and you can look at it as a trend line. So if you look at this, you can edit this. So let's go to style. So you can take this out. So you can look at it this way, and the flow is still the same thing. You have an impulse, you have a correction, you have an impulse, you have a correction. So on this time frame, on the hourly time frame, you're looking at this pivot point right here. So the pivot point is set right here. And what happens? We took out these highs. Same thing. another pivot point. So price delivers back to this trend line on the hourly time frame. Now the pivot point again, because you had this reaction from this area, you're looking at this reaction from this area, and the anticipation again at this point is for price to take out these highs. So every time price pulls back to a pivot point, you see what price does. It takes out the highs. So it pulls back and it takes out the highs. So looking at this, the bias for me coming into next week on the DXY is still to see prices getting this delivery to the upside. And now once you understand what's happening on the hourly time frame, it just ties with what's happening on the daily time frame as well. So this could be a delivery to this trend line on the daily time frame. So putting this, let's put this again right here. So this is a channel thing I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the reaction from the buyers and the sellers in both directions. So you have this piece right here. There's a pivot point set right here. You have the same thing. There's a pivot point set right here. So how is price going to move and how is the delivery going to look like? So you look at this interaction right here. You had sellers stepping in and you had buyers stepping in. You've had buyers stepping in. There was a reaction here from this psychological level of 100 flat. Sellers interacted and price pushed again to the downside. So the float thing I'm looking at on the hourly time frame is very simple. It's an impulse, it's a correction. It's an impulse, it's a correction. So personally, I think price is still going to move again to the upside just so we can get a delivery to this trend line on the daily time frame. So now for price to move to the upside, it might not just go to the upside directly. We might see price pulling back to an area like this and you see the movement thing again to the upside, but it might be a complex pullback and it might just be a simple move to the upside. Now that's not really my concern at this point. All I want to see is the delivery to this trend line on the daily time frame. That's all I want to see, and I'm playing off of this pivot points right here, and I'm playing off of this. So if price wants to, it can pull back and then it takes off, and if it doesn't pull back, you could see price just giving you a delivery like this to the daily time frame. So coming into next week, the bias for me on the DXY is to see prices moving to the upside. And when you look at the DXY and the indices, there's been this positive correlation thing. So I think for about a month or almost 2 months now, the DXY on these indices like US30, S&P, NAS100, we've had this positive correlation. So it's different from what we had before. So before we had negative correlation. So once you had the DXY, let's say moving to the upside like this, you was expecting sales on those other pairs. And the only pair that's like really negatively correlated right now with the DXY, I think is gold, off of the pairs I'm looking at. But with the other pairs, US30, NAS100, S&P, they've all been in this positive correlation phase. So if we are expecting this movement on the DXY to the upside, this might give you an understanding as to why these other pairs like US30, NAS100, and the S&P500, you might see some buying pressure coming in again next week. All right guys, so that's it for me on the DXY right there. So I'm expecting this delivery. I'm expecting a delivery to this trend line right here, and how price delivers to this trend line is not really my concern. All I have to do is look at this movement to the upside and see how the price is moving. If it decides to come back to an area like this, that's fine. If it takes off from this pivot point, that's perfectly fine. If it decides to get a continuation move like this, that's still okay. But the overall bias thing for me on the DXY, it's a movement to the upside, testing the psychological level right here, 100 flat. We might go above it, pull back, and we'll see a delivery all the way to the daily trend line. So that's it right there for me on the DXY. I have this bias to the upside, and I'll use this, and then we'll look at other pairs and see how this is correlating and how we can take positions off of those other pairs. All right guys, let's start with the first one. All right guys, so the first pair I'm looking at is US30. So we're just picking up from where we left, let's say last week. So this is right here, US30 here's on the hourly time frame, and I could look at those other time frames like the daily and all of that, but I did that analysis last week. So let's go over what I'm looking at right now. So here was my anticipation last week. I was expecting prices, so the flow for me on this hourly time frame we had an impulse, we had a correction, and we had another impulsive move right here. We didn't take out these highs at the time while I was looking at this. We hadn't taken out these highs. So my expectation was to see prices pulling back to an area like this and an inability for prices to move to the downside. Then we could take the buys to the upside. So this didn't happen and price just held through. So when you look at this, I'm going to take this out right now. So we'll look at this and I'll take this out as well. So looking at this, the flow on the hourly time frame is very important, because when you look at it, it's an impulse, it's a correction. It was an impulse right here. I was expecting price to push back to the downside so we can take buys again off of this. So it didn't happen this way. Now price was giving us another flow within this bigger picture move thing. So you have an impulse right here, you have a correction. You can look at this as an impulse, you look at this as a correction, and now price is giving us another impulse. So there's two ways I'm going to look at this pair. So right now we've taken out this piece right here, which is something I was looking at. So take it off the hourly, put it on the 4-hour time frame. Cool. So here's what I'm looking at right now on US30. There's two ways you can look at this. So the first way, you can put, let's say, another trend line thing if you want to. So you can do a trend line move right here, and this is very easy. So you can do a trend line right here on this hourly time frame. So this is one way to look at it, or you can do another channel within this overall structure thing. So here's one way. You look at this trend line right here. So this is going to help us anticipate where price is most likely going to gravitate to and how you can take buys or sells off of this. So the first thing is, you're looking at this flow right here. It's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse. So personally, if I'm looking for buys off of this, I'll wait for a correction to an area like this so we can take prices again to the upside. Now there's two ways. You can see prices pulling back to this area and we take the buys to the upside, or you see price pulling back, there's a violation, there's a delivery back to this area right here. So you had a pivot point set right here, and you could expect a pivot point reaction at this area, and you see price moving again to the upside. So there's many possibilities while looking at this, and at the same time you can use a channel just to make it easy for you if you have a channel thing right here. So here's another possibility on US30. You can look at this using this channel flow thing, and it makes it like really easy for you to play with the price interaction thing, and also playing with the pivot point. So you're looking at the interaction from the buyers, you're looking at the interaction from the sellers. So here's the possibility thing I'm looking at on US30. Now, if we had to go off of psychological levels, so where is price at currently? So we're currently trading above 40,000, and where is price most likely going to gravitate to? If the DXY keeps moving to the upside, which I think that's what's going to happen, because we're probably just recovering from this massive sales that came in, or this massive sell-off that came in, we should see prices gravitating towards 50,000. Now this is going to take time, because I think we're just recovering from this massive sales. So price is not just going to run all the way to the upside. It's going to give us, let's say, a series of, you having an impulse, you get a correction, you having an impulse, you get a correction, you have an impulse, you get a correction, all the way to 50,000. So while looking at this on the hourly time frame again, you can look at this on, let's say, minor structures. So we have this piece right here. So the big structure thing, so this is something I'm looking at. You have this major move, it's an impulse, it's a correction. So that's one. And now you have everything right here. So everything right here, you can look at this on higher time frames, let's say the 4-hour time frame and the 8-hour time frame, and you can consider everything as another impulse thing. And if price comes back to an area like this, then you're looking for buys. That's on the bigger picture thing, that's on the bigger time frame thing, let's say the 4 hours and the 8 hours, or the daily time frame. Now if you stick with the flow that's on the hourly time frame, just a minor structure thing, then you're looking at this. It's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, you can wait for a correction, and you look for price to move again to the upside. So that's the minor structure thing I'm looking at right there on US30, and I think this is the same thing across all the indices. So I'll pay attention to this. And remember, again, we're looking at the DXY thing, and we're expecting the DXY to move to the upside again. On the hourly time frame, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction. We could see this pullback and a further move to the upside. So US30, S&P, NAS100, they're all positively correlated to the DXY currently, and at some point this correlation is going to switch. It's going to switch from positive to negative. It's going to happen eventually. It's always like a cycle thing. Sometimes it's positively correlated, sometimes it's negatively correlated. So this is the flow thing: impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. We could see a correction thing right here. Now if you're looking at US30, let's say on lower time frames, on the 15-minute time frame, on the 5-minute time frame, you can play with this structure that's right here. There's a structured move within this area. It's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction. But personally, I don't like looking at the 5-minute time frames and stuff like that, because there's so much noise on these lower time frames. And again, I'd rather just stick to what's happening on higher time frames. It makes this price action like clearer, and it makes it easier for me to see what price is really doing on this time frame. So we could see this pullback to an area like this, and you see price taking up. That's a possibility. Or you just see a continuation move to the upside. That makes it completely difficult for me to trade. So if I was to anticipate another move thing right here, there's two ways I can take trades off of US30. You got to pull back to an area like this, and I'll be looking for buying opportunities to the upside. So that's one possibility right here. You get an inability for price to go through this area. Same thing, same analysis from like what we had last week. So we're looking at this, that's maybe a 1:4 right there. So there's a possibility right there. So on US30 now, you can see price crashing back to an area like this because you had a pivot point set right here. You're expecting another pivot point to be set right here. So the other possibility is for us to see, let's say, an impulsive move to the downside to an area like this, and you see a further move to the upside. So that's another possibility, and you can look for buying opportunities off of this area right here. Same thing. So this is it, like two possibilities right there. So let's keep this clean, keep it clean. So that's it, possibility number one, possibility number two right there. So those are the possibilities I'm looking at on US30. So the first thing, I'm just waiting for price to pull back, and I'm looking for buying opportunities if it pulls back. Now the DXY might just move to the upside, and because of the positive correlation, we might see US30 just continuing its move again to the upside, and that's fine. So I only want to play within this range. I just want to play within this structure move, so it makes it really easy for me to anticipate the moves and play off of those areas. All right guys, so that's what I'm looking on US30, and let's see how this plays out for next week, and I'll keep you guys updated as well. All right, let's look at the next pair. All right guys, so here's NAS100 on the hourly time frame, and here's the next pair we're looking at. And again, if you haven't seen the previous market focus, you can look at the previous video, you understand it. So you can look at this on higher time frames and everything. It's completely easy. So the flow for me again on the hourly time frame, it's an impulse, it's a correction right here. And right now you have this movement thing right here. You can look at this on higher time frames, 8 hours on the daily time frame, it's an impulse thing. So you can look at it as an impulse. You can consider everything as an impulse, and you wait for price to pull back to this area, and you look for buying opportunities. So looking at this, let's go off of this psychological levels just to establish the movement thing. So if price is moving to the upside, there's an impulse correction, and everything. Currently price is sat above 20,000, which is a psychological level right here. And where is price most likely going to gravitate to? I'm looking at this psychological level of 25,000. So that's the next area price can gravitate to. So it's going to take time for this movement thing and for us to see price moving all the way to 25,000. One thing for sure is if price has to move to the upside, it's going to give us a series of impulse, like there's an impulse correction, all the way to 25,000. So that's something I know it's going to happen just based off of how price moves and basic price action. So I know price is going to do something like that. Now looking at this on the hourly time frame, so let's see what we can do. Going off of what happened on US30, I was also expecting this impulse, and I was expecting a correction to an area like this so I can get buying possibilities. Now this didn't happen, so we'll clean this, take this out, and take this out as well. So how is price moving? And there's something I've been talking about, like market flow, just looking at the reaction points and the pivot points. So if you're going off of this, you have this pressure right here from the sellers, you have this right here from the buyers, you have this right here from the buyers. So there's a possibility you see price coming back to an area like this, and you see price taking off to the upside. That's one possibility. Another possibility, you can look at the minor structure thing within this area. So right here, you can put a trend line right here, and you see the same thing. You have this impulse right here, correction, there's an impulse, correction, there's an impulse. You wait for a correction to an area like this, and you take buying opportunities. Now, that's one possibility. You can do this with a simple trend line, or you use, let's say, the channel thing, and you go off of this right here. You go off of this piece right here. So here's what I'm looking at currently on NAS100. I'm just going to keep this fixated on the chart, and let's look at it. So there's two possibilities on NAS100, similar to what's happening on US30. You could play within this structure move right here. Let's keep this fixated as well. So you can play within this structure move right here. You're looking at this structure move right here, giving you this piece right here. So that's one possibility. So on NAS100 is the same thing. You can play with this structure move right here, or you wait to see if price can give you a delivery to an area like this, and then you take prices again to the upside. So those are all possibilities. But going off of the flow thing and the hourly time frame, there's a bigger flow, there's a minor flow thing. So you have an impulse correction thing. Everything is an impulse right now, but within this impulsive move, if you zoom in, here's what I'm looking at. If you zoom in, here's the structure thing I'm looking at. It's an impulse. Price had a consolidation thing, but eventually you had a drop back to an area like this, and you had buyers reacting off of this area. Currently, you've seen this correction thing again. Now, if this drops to the downside to an area like this, then I'm looking for buying opportunities off of this area. It's very similar to what's happening on US30. So there's two areas I can take buying opportunities from. So the first one is you get a pullback to an area like this, and we'll take buying opportunities. That's one. Or you get a push to this area right here, and we'll look for buying opportunities again to the upside. Now, this might have difficulties going through this area, so I'll just put it right there. So there's two opportunities on this right now. So I'm going to show you guys. If we get a bounce off of this area, so if we get a pivot point respected at this area, the first buy attempt, you're buying off of this area, and you just want to take an exit around this area. But if we buy off of this area, then I have to hold this longer, because we're looking at a bigger move thing. So you're looking at this move right here. So you can clean this. You're looking at this move right here, because that's a bigger picture thing right there. So I'm just going to stick to the minor structure thing and see what we're playing with on the minor structure. So again, if price pulls back to an area like this, and in a believer price is to go through this area, you know the pivot point has been set already, and you're just going off of that, and that's it right there. So that's it. You have a pivot point set right here. There's a pivot point set right here. You're looking at the flow thing. It's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse. You wait for a correction, and in a believer price is to go through this area, then I'm looking for buying opportunities again to the upside. However, if price breaks out of this area and you get a delivery to this area, we can still look for buying opportunities off of this pivot point right here, which is like similar to what I've been explaining. So it's just a trend line shift thing. So you can look at it from one time frame to the next time frame. If you get a violation of this trend line, we'll just wait for price to give those, like this delivery to this next trend line. You look for buying opportunities again. So it makes it like completely easy. So that's it right there, and that's my analysis on NAS100. So this is what I'm looking at on NAS100. Now, if this push happens to the downside, you can look at this on US30 and say, all right, cool, we might see this push coming, on the DXY. You might see this push coming back, or you might even see price get into this area and you get a push to the downside. So if we get the push thing, and if the DXY was still positively correlated to these indices, then you could see this delivery on this other time frames as well. So here's what I'm looking on NAS100, and it's not different from what's happening on the S&P 500. So we'll look at the next pair, and that's the S&P 500, and it's a similar move thing. So it's like a copy and paste thing on these other pairs. Alright guys, so here's the S&P 500 and the hourly time frame as well. So what we're looking at is the same thing. So what's the flow on this time frame? So you can look at the bigger picture thing, and prices is recovering from this overall sell. I mentioned this already, and during the previous market focus we looked at that already. So you're looking at this move to the upside. It's an impulse, it's a correction, and everything right now is just an impulse. But within this impulsive move, you can see price giving you a minor structure thing right here. So there's two ways you can look at this. I was expecting a push from here to the downside, just a correction, so we can take prices to the upside. Because for me, I'm always looking for pullbacks to the trend lines. I'm always looking for pullbacks to the pivot points. So once price starts moving, it gives you this, it establishes there's some pivot points. So you're looking at this right here, pivot point, massive sell. You're looking at this pivot point, massive buy. You're looking at this piece right here. There's a pivot point right here, massive buys, taking out these highs. So you can look at these pivot points and you expect price to pull back to these areas, and you look for buying opportunities or selling opportunities. So it's the same thing right now. Big picture, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse. Price could pull back to an area like this and see price moving to the upside. Now let's look at psychological levels and see what levels we're playing with. So we're currently trading between 5,000 and 6,000. So if we get a pullback, or just looking at this, where is price headed to? You're looking at this impulsive move right here. Price came back, so we traded above this area, which is 5,000. There was an inability for price to drop below 5,000, and ever since we've just seen price moving to the upside gradually. So we're having this recovery. It's a gradual move to the upside. So the anticipation for me is for prices to get to 6,000. So how is price going to get to 6,000? It's going to give you a series of like the impulse thing, the correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction, all the way to 6,000. So when you look at this, and you can just put something like this. So this is it. So you get a big picture right here. It's an impulse, it's a correction. You look at this as an impulse, you can wait for a correction right here. That's one possibility. Or you go within the structure move. You go within the structure move. It's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. You wait for a correction. So there's two ways you can look at this, or there's two ways you can approach the buys on this, and I'm still expecting buys. First, put your trend line move right here, and you're looking at this piece right here. So here's the first one right here. Cool. So we're looking at this piece right here, just a minor structure thing. So, and this on the hourly time frame. So let's look at this. So you get an impulse right here, you get a correction, you get an impulse, you can wait for a correction, and this is only if price corrects. So if price doesn't correct and you just see price moving to the upside explosively, then everything you're seeing here doesn't even make sense at that point, and you have to erase everything, reanalyze, and look at the structure price is giving you, because price can give you this. Let me show you. You can look at this. It's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction. So price can play out off of this structure right here, impulse, correction, impulse, correction, and you see price just moving to the upside. But if you respect the structure I'm looking at, it's an impulse correction thing, impulse correction. So if this happens, then I'm still looking for buying opportunities. And I mentioned this already. You can look at this piece. It's very simple. You can look at it as a single trend line move, and you have an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction, all the way to the upside. So again, it's just the same thing. Or you can look at it as a channel. So it guides your movement thing. You're getting the reaction from the buyers, you're getting the reaction from the sellers, buyers and sellers. So if the sellers give you this push to the downside, you're looking for an inability for prices to go through this area, and you're looking for buying opportunities. So that's the first one right there. Or if you zoom out and you go off of this structure, impulse correction, you're looking at this. If price comes back to an area like this, inability, you're looking for buying opportunities right there. So let's zoom in and I'll just stay with this structure right here. So here's it right now. It's an impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction, and I'm looking for buying opportunities. So I'll wait and see if price can correct to the downside. So if we see this correction coming in right here, I'll look for buying opportunities again. So here's the structure I'm looking at, and here's the structure I'll be playing with next week. So we're looking at this. If I get a movement right here, I'm looking for buying opportunities again. So here is it. Here's my anticipation again now. And the fact that price pulls back to an area like this, it doesn't mean you're going to see the movement to the upside. It's always it's usually very complex. It's not as easy as it looks. So this is the structure thing I'm looking at, and this is the flow I'm looking at. So I'm going off of this flow. It's an impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse. So that's the flow I'm looking at. Now once price starts pulling back, keep this fixated right here. Once price starts pulling back to an area like this, then I'm going to wait and look for this inability of price to go through this area. Wait for certain confirmations that tells me, all right, cool, we might see an inability of prices to go through this area, and this might be a turning point. Why? Because you have this as a pivot point, this as a pivot point, and you look for a similar move to what happened during this previous reactions, and you wait for this price. If it turns, and you look for this push to the upside. So there's more I look at to when it comes to the entries, and I'm not just waiting for price to pull back to these areas. So as price starts pulling back, it's an impulse correction. I have to study the correction and see how price is coming back. Then I look for entry confirmations and everything. All right, guys, but that's a flow thing right there, and that's what I'm expecting. And if it pulls back, then I'm looking for buying opportunities. So that's it for me on the S&P 500. Let's look at the last one. All right, guys, so here's gold on the daily time frame, and I told you guys I took a loss on this. So here was my anticipation from last week. So we had this massive movement to the upside. So if you look at this structure thing right here, let's clear this out. So you look at this structure thing right here, and I was looking at this as a break to the upside. So I was expecting prices to move to the upside. So I looked at this piece right here as price pulled back to an area like this. This was a push to the upside. I was looking at this as a pullback, and inability for prices to drop within this area. I was expecting the buys to continue. Now this is a little bit different. So what happened is completely different. We had price just pushing again to the downside and then coming back within the structure thing. So you're looking at this impulse reaction from the sellers. There's a push down, reaction from the sellers. There's a push down. This right here might be a fake breakout thing. So I was looking at this as a violation of this trend line and a test of it, so we can bounce off of that. And it didn't really happen. So if price is pushing back within the structure thing, we might see gold just dropping again to the downside. And I said this already. When you look at what's happening on the DXY, how's the DXY moving? You look at the flow, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction. You could see this impulsive move to the upside. And if you're looking at this push on the DXY for this delivery on the daily time frame, knowing that the DXY on gold is negatively correlated right now, you could see gold drop into the downside. So you could see this push to the downside. Now look at this and ask yourself certain questions. What psychological levels are we playing with? Here we have 3,000, the next one is 4,000. So I still think there's a possibility we'll get to 4,000 if we keep maintaining this buying pressure to the upside. So temporarily you'll see price pushing back, you'll see the sell-off coming in. That's okay. But if we stay above 3,000, then logically we headed to 4,000. Now let's look at this on lower time frames and see what we're even playing with. So on the 8-hour time frame, for example, I had a trend line I was looking at this morning right here. So I was looking at the flow thing on this time frame, and it's been an impulse, it's been a correction, it's been an impulse, it's been a correction. And this just tells me, all right, cool, the reason this sales might have failed here is most likely because sellers, or let's say you might see this selling pressure, like you see this impulsive move to the downside. There's a pullback thing, impulse correction. and price might get to an area like this before the buyers kick in again. So that's one possibility. Now take note, when you look at this on the daily time frame right here, so I have a trend line on the 8-hour time frame that goes through this piece right here. It's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. And you might see a correction to an area like this, and you see buyers taking off again. So that's one possibility right there, or you see sellers coming in and an impulsive move to an area like this, and you see price taking off. So that's what I'm looking at right there. If you step down to the 8-hour time frame, simple trend line, just so you can guide, like the trend line is there just to gauge the movement thing. So you're looking at everything that's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. We could see a correction and for price to move to the upside. So that's what I'm looking at right there on the 8-hour time frame. So let's see on the 4-hour time frame right there. So I had this buying opportunities, I think up here, not this one. So let's take this out right there. Cool. All right guys, so it's an impulse thing, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, and we're waiting for this correction right here. So on lower time frames, I think on the hourly time frame, if I was to look at this on the hourly time frame, so just so you can see how price is moving currently. Now on the hourly time frame, it's an impulse, it's a correction, everything, this area got taken out. It's another impulse right here, it's a correction, so we could see this area taken out as well, and you see price dropping again to the downside, and then we look for buying opportunities. So again, if you're looking for selling opportunities, it's still valid as well, because if you look at the DXY, you're expecting this movement to the upside, but be a little bit careful because the DXY might pull back a little bit before giving you this movement to the upside, and if that happens on the DXY, you might see some buying pressure coming in from gold, and then later on you see the selling opportunities, or you see the sales coming in. Then after that you can see the buying opportunities. So looking at this again on the 8-hour time frame, here's a flow thing I'm looking at. So, and once I have the flow, I just look for the pivot points. It's an impulse, it's a correction, highs were taken out. It's an impulse, it's a correction, highs were taken out. So already I can tell if this is a pivot point, if we see price pulling back to an area like this, same thing, pivot point right here, and we'll expect buying opportunities again to the upside. If it fails to react from this area, then you could see something like this and a movement to the downside. So that's it right there, guys. So if I was to anticipate a move on this, I would look for, let's say, I want to see price selling back to an area like this, then we'd look at this buying opportunities, taking out these highs, something like this. So there's a minor structure thing right there. So let's see if we can play with this, and if this happens, then taking out these highs can give us a 1:4. So that's it right there. I'm just going off of the flow on the hourly, on the 8-hour time frame on gold. So those are the possibilities I'm looking at right there. A pullback, then looking for buys, or you get price pulling back, you get this trend line, let's say you get a violation of this trend line. So if this trend line gets violated, so I'll put this trend line on the daily time frame just so we can see. Step back to the daily, so right here. So the thing is, I don't like seeing trend lines on every time frame because it makes the analysis look like really dirty. So you're looking at this as an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. We could see a correction right here. So we could see price pulling back. So here's a first point of concern for me. If price pulls back to an area like this, it might not necessarily just drop to this area. That's one thing. So we might see the push to that area, and this will be this area as well I'll be paying attention to, because we might see price pulling back here and you see an impulsive move to the upside. So if this fails, then you could see this push, violation, test, and you see a further move to the downside. So that's what I'm looking at right there. So on the 8-hour time frame, you have this push right here, impulse correction, impulse correction. Same thing on the 4-hour time frame. It's an impulse correction, impulse correction. And as well, you can look at it on the hourly. Impulse correction, impulse correction. So that's it right there. So it's an impulse, it's a correction, impulse, correction. So let's see how this plays out, and we might see price delivering again to the downside, and eventually you see price taking off to the upside. That's my analysis right there, guys, and I hope this makes lots of sense. And yeah, let's see how this plays out, and I'll keep you guys updated next week if I have any possibilities, if I have any trading confirmations. So if we get a pullback on the S&P, I'll look for buys. You get a pullback on NAS, I'll look for buying opportunities as well. If we get a pullback on US30, I'll look for buys as well. So let's take out this other structure thing right here. Well, you know what, let's skip it. I'll look at it next week and see what actually happened, and we'll play off of those. All right, guys, so that's my analysis right there, and I hope again it makes sense. And stay patient and be consistent with everything you do, and I'll see you during the next one. Bye for now.